Okay, so for anybody that will see the broadcast, we're starting a little late because there's literally a parade outside and it's been a little distracting.
Sorry.
So we'll see if we can get through some of this stuff in about an hour or so. Just it's going to be very overview. Hopefully nothing too technical. Just an intro as to how things work on the web. And maybe Jared is going to come in at some point just because I'm not a super expert in this. So it's going to be very simple from my end. Hopefully it'll be accurate enough. So we're going to start talking about server and the client dynamic and the web. And I think most of us are obviously very familiar with websites, with the internet in general. And what happens is I believe Chrome or Safari or Internet Explorer, any browser would be the client. Is that correct, Jaron? That would be the client side of the dynamic. And then the server side would be where all the data is stored at a server. Typically, it's a computer. It's just like a computer, like anything else, maybe with different configurations or a different operating system. And it's kind of like a call and answer dynamic. You know, the client requests some information, and the server is in charge of sending that back. So it's pretty simple in that way. The way I think about it in real life terms is kind of like a restaurant. You go to a restaurant and then you have a menu, and then you can request a plate, and then they bring it out to you. In fact, the server brings it out to you. So that's how I think maybe a good analogy is explained. The plate would be the website itself, right? You get your nice dish, you requested for a dish, and now you have this thing that came out of somewhere. And you don't necessarily know how the plate got cooked or prepared by the kitchen, but somebody had to. And I think that is the server. The server takes care of sending that to you. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add to that, maybe. That's a little bit more technical.
No, I don't want to be technical. One thing I want to make sure people don't get confused on, especially as we move to the Rails course, is we're talking about server clients. And so, you know, you've got, I made my computer's huge. I'll make this one big. You know, if this is your browser, so you've got some stuff in here. And it can send a request off to the server. We're used to seeing, you know, all right, here's the internet in between. And it's sending a request to the server. And then the server is somewhere here, you know, it can be Google or whatever. And it's going to receive this request and then send it back. And the client will render it. And I think it's relatively clear when you're doing it against somebody else's server, Google or something like that. But one thing that's important to remember when you move into Rails or anything else is that the server doesn't have to be over here in some cloud space. It could be that you have your own computer and you're running your server down here as another program, which is like Rails or Sinatra. And instead of going out here for a server client request, it's making a request and it being returned this way. And just because the Sinatra code, the Rails code, just because your Ruby code is running on your same computer doesn't change the dynamic of the server-client relationship. It just changes where it asks for information. So this thing serving up data could reside anywhere, locally, remote.
So essentially, you're cooking at home over here. You're still doing the dynamic. It's just that it's locally. You're requesting data from inside your own computer, but there's still two different concepts. You still have your client and you still have your server.
Right. And as we talk about this stuff more, you'll get a feel for what code runs on the server and what code runs on the client. And that's one of the key things to understand when you're talking about web development, so that you don't get confused or mix up where something is occurring. And if you can understand that, you will have gotten over probably a big hurdle that a lot of people struggle with, is where is this happening?
Cool. Does anybody have any questions about that?
It's like, is it like same thing that we do on PHP or something like that? Same mechanism? Client server?
On what?
Like when you do the PHP coding or with development, like requesting from the web server and then getting the information back.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
Same thing like I have done little bit of PHP.
PSP?
Yeah.
Oh, PHP. Okay.
It's the same concept.
Yes, it's the same concept. PHP code runs on the server.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's what we're going to talk more about, is where the code runs is one of the key parts to understand.
Yeah.
As we go through this, because some code, but we'll cover this more, but in general, you can say the only code that runs on here is JavaScript. This isn't a perfect comparison. JavaScript, and then it does rendering of other stuff, whereas anything else, you know.
But you have CSS too, right? And
yeah,
HTML. That's more of a markup thing.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't. I mean,
okay.
They can be, but everything else really runs on the server.
Yeah. So it could be any language, like you have Java servers, you have, PHP, you have, I don't know, there's tons, right? There's Python, Ruby.
Well, I loved your food analogy. I think it worked great, because your food can be cooked a whole bunch of different ways, right? If I order a steak, they might cook it on a grill, they might cook it in an oven, they might do a sous vide slow cook process on that steak or something else. There could be a dozen different ways for it to be handled. But it's not really, typically you're not as concerned about exactly how it's cooked, you're concerned about what you get back. Yeah.
That was very rousing.
Yeah,
I was getting.
Thank you. I've got some support on my speech here.
I was getting inspired by your explanation.
You should be inspired by my explanation.
And so, going with the same analogy, I think there's only so many ways you can eat your food, right? Like you only have forks and spoons, and so there's just one way. And same way, the client only has JavaScript at its disposal to interpret that data that it gets back. So let's move on to the HTTP protocol. I also might need your help on that. But
yeah,
a good tip I think for you guys, and actually I use this a lot. You guys know about Reddit?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's this really good subreddit called "Explain It to Me Like I'm 5," like this. And usually, if I have a tough concept that I want to understand, I will Google. For example, in this case, I Googled HTTP protocol, and then Eli 5, which stands for Explaining Like I'm 5. And I think this first link was pretty good. Actually, no. Let me see. I think it was this one. You want to look around to see which one has the better explanation. And I'm not going to read all of it, but this one right here, I think it's good. It explains that you have a URL on the top making a request, and the protocol allows you to ask this particular way for some information from the server. In this case, HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And when you do that, you get information back in a status code, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
And the status code that you get back, you're going to be dealing with a lot later on as you get more into web development, because it's very essential to determining what happened at the server level when you made the request, whether it was successful, whether it was an error, whether you asked the right thing or you asked the wrong thing, or you asked with the wrong information. And so if the server is set up properly, then it would be fairly, not simple, but it would be fairly straightforward to figure out where you went wrong. One thing, do we want to talk about how websites work? Every computer has an IP address, and it's all individual to a certain computer. And the way that a website works is when you type in, for example, reddit.com, really what you're doing is you're making a request to this, is it a database or it's just a service, right? That kind of keeps an index of IP addresses for a domain name.
So it can get really complex, but it's just, I mean, it's a database. Originally, it was just a text file that had this information, and obviously it's grown over the years.
Yeah.
And it's sort of hierarchical too, so it's structured. I think when it comes to how you get to someone's site, the best comparison is mail and how mail works, real mail, physical mail. Because if I mail something, to Jorge in Raleigh, I'm going to put a whole bunch of different information on there. And at each level along the route, they're going to use those different granular pieces of information to figure out how to route it. So there's going to be a zip code and a city and a street address and a person's name. In that case, when I send it off, the postal service will look at it and they'll go, oh, this goes to Raleigh? Okay, put it in the pile with all the Raleigh stuff. And I don't care what that means beyond Raleigh.
Right.
So get it to the Raleigh area. And then the Raleigh mail person will go, okay, now to the street, get it in the pile with the right street information. And then they'll get it to the actual address with his name on it. And a website works the same way. So if you go to Google, for example, there's actually at least two pieces of information in the address for Google that it's using to figure out where to go. So first it's looking at, I think, the .com, because it goes backwards. So it says, oh, I've got a .com address. That's sort of like a city that's saying, oh, this belongs to this collection of these types of addresses. So go to the place that knows about .coms. And then it says, okay, now in this place that knows about .coms, look for the Google one. And it looks up Google, and then it actually translates that into just a number, which is known as your IP address. And once you have that, now he doesn't have to go through the postal service anymore. Now he can directly go to this Google page, but he's going to it with an IP address instead of with a name. All of that's transparent behind the scenes.
Does that make sense?
It's tricky. It takes a little bit to learn. I think if you go down to the bottom, maybe I don't know if this one works anymore. The very bottom of your page. Might not work in full screen. It may not work anymore. You used to be able to see the IP address a lot of times in the site, but
gotcha.
I don't think that's that important.
Right. Cool. So one thing that you're going to encounter in web development, and especially on the server side, is the concept, the RESTful concept. Also, I think it's not one-to-one, so take this with a grain of salt. But you also hear CRUD, and that stands for.
that's okay if I erase it.
So you'll normally hear about the acronym, but so you have, and this stands for create. This stands for read, update, delete. So as you build an application, you're going to start thinking about your information as a resource. And so you remember we talked a little bit about classes during Ruby and how they're objects. And when you have an object in real life, you can do things to it. You can store them. You can look them up and grab them. You can maybe change it or change its properties. And you can also throw them away. So that is in my understanding, that's what RESTful stands for, is that you want to have your data and the way that you handle it in a way that you can just do those 4 actions and be able to deal with it in that way. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or if that's too oversimplified.
No, I mean, I think that's fine. We need to step back to just the basic web or HTTP protocol commands. So I don't know if you had that as the next one, because we want to map to that, and then we can talk about bring them back over to this.
Okay, yeah.
Time, but yeah.
The get code.
Yeah.
So the reason for this is that we have some actions that you can do on the internet as a client to get these things to be done on the server side. And when Jared talks about mapping, we're essentially saying, what does that translate to on the client? How do we make this happen on the server? And the way that you do it is post, you have get, you have put, and patch is interchangeable usually, right?
Yeah. Usually.
Sometimes you have patch, and then this is the reason I did it all caps like that is because usually you will see it this way on logs or like any monitoring tool that you might have. You will see it commonly this way. So over here you have concepts of what you can do with your data. And this is the actual keywords that the client can use or the server understands as well. It gets a little bit more complex than that, but this is the core concept of your main actions on a client side. And I think there's more, right? There's other ones that are a little bit more nuanced, right? But
Yeah.
These are the core ones.
Yeah, there are other ones. I like what you said here, because that's exactly what I was going to mention. This is a mapping. You want to think in concepts. So this is, there's nothing concrete about this CRUD concept. This is just a way to think about anything that you work with. Is I need to be able to create things, update them, delete them, and read the information out of them. Those are just actions you need to take. There's no concrete concepts there. That came from database, really. But these, this sort of got connected later in life, because these actions that you can take, these HTTP actions, came before these things got mapped together. These actions were just about web servers originally and being able to get information from it. And then later people realized, oh, they map pretty nicely back to our concepts of how we do stuff on the back end. So maybe we can use a more direct mapping. Before that, it was a much more complex way of communicating between stuff. And it didn't necessarily map so easily to these concepts. So we can pull up, like, search for the first website. First website. Click on that top result there. Okay, click on browse the first website. Sweet. Now what I want you to do is pull up your DevTools. So this is way back before any of these concepts existed. Before that, like, not before these protocols existed, but before CRUD mapped to things. We zoom in on this, click on the network tab, and then refresh. What we should be able to see, click disable cache. All right, try it now. Do you have any filters on or anything? Yeah, filter on.
All right.
So all, not just XHR. There we go. Okay. So after you get rid of the filters, and, there we go. If we look at this, you click on this, the project, so we can just expand it out. It's very, very simple. Move over to the headers side down there. So I think this is,
yeah.
I want to start with, like, the most simple thing ever. This is the first website that ever existed. So the way that this worked, the way that you got information was very, very simple. You see we had this one real request here, the project.html. And what it did was it sent a request to this address, the info.cern, http://info.cern.ch, hypertext www.project.html. And the type of request it sent was a GET request. That's coming over into this. So these are the actual HTTP requests that you send. So it sent a GET request, and then the web server responded, and that's what you have in the response tab up there. So if you go over to the response tab, it responded with this website, all of this data, this HTML markup. And that's what it sent back. So if we go back to our client server model here, and if this is your browser, again, yeah, this is distracting. This browser sent a GET request for this specific page, and the server responded with the data for it, as well as a status code. And that's what you can see there for the status code. And then the data in this case was just HTML that it sent back. And then the web browser knows how to render that information.
Yeah, as you can see, it also kind of maps with this, right, up here, with the actual website. It's just now interpreted with the HTML that was sent back. So this would be the same, right, essentially?
Yeah, it's the same data. It's just been run through something that knows how to present that data, right?
Yeah. Let's see.
But that's the most, I mean, that's as basic as you can get in terms of a website. And there's still a lot going on behind the scenes that we didn't talk about, might talk about a little bit more. But whenever you're working, whenever you're on a website, that's basically what's happening, at least initially. You're sending a GET request to give me data, and it's responding with that data and status codes on it. Now if we go to a more complex site, go to Google, and let's pull up the DevTools under it. Yeah. And if we take a look, can we get rid of the timeline? Not show it so we get that extra space? And then we can. Is it the camera? Oh no, the camera's snapshots. Don't worry about it. Oh no. I think it's if you, hold on, it's right up there. No, go back to network. It's right there after view, I think.
This.
Yeah,
Hi.
click that. There you go. So now if you take a look at what just happened on this Google site, you can see that there was a lot more going on. It's not one request. And even, let's do one more thing. If you right click on your column names, or yeah, you can add in the not protocol, is it scheme? What am I looking for? Oh, maybe it's already on there and I just am not seeing it. You should be able to tell if it's a get or a...
Probably method.
Oh, method. Yeah, method.
Yeah.
There you go. And you can see, like I said, on this Google page, there's a lot more requests being made, but most of them are still the same type of thing that we've already seen. They're GET requests. Get me a piece of information. And then you've got your status code right next to it. Get. Oh, here's what happened when I gave that to you.
What's that 200 actually for this status? What does that indicate?
200. Okay. So that's a good segue to status codes. 200 typically is okay status, meaning everything went fine, success. Here's your data. There's a cool website I like called, I think it's status codes. Let me see. Yeah. Status cats.
What?
Yeah. So this is fun. Let's look at 200. Okay.
Oh,
Everything went okay. And you'll see codes that are very common. If you guys put in an address that doesn't exist, let me see if I can do
Example.com.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It doesn't exist?
No, it can't exist. You can use example.com always.
Oh, okay.
It's written into the standards as something that won't exist. So you can use it as like an email address to test with if you need to use a test email.
Ah, okay.
Because you're never going to interview with somebody else.
Let's see.
And I don't know if you'll get a 404, but example.com doesn't exist.
Yeah, there it is. Well, that's for the, no, never mind. The 404 this is not a good example, but the 404 is for some data that is not found in the server. So if you do a GET request, the server will come back and say, I didn't find this. So let me give you a 404 request status code. Let's see if I can find it here. Not found. There's also another common one is 500. Internal server error. That means that the server does not know how to handle that request. And so that's just a standard way of saying, I don't know what's happening. I think you have, what is the redirect one? 301, I want to say?
301 is one of them. Yeah.
It'd be 30.
I think it might be 302 is the move temporarily, if I could be wrong. Oh no, that's found.
Let's see, 303. See other. I think there's on the wiki. There's like it's separated by blocks, right? Like you have everything that is 200 is falls under the second or the successful category. I believe.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so let me make this. You can even see it here. And so you see the classifications right here. Everything that starts with everything in the 100s, it's informational. Everything in the 200s means that there was a success of some kind. 300 is some sort of redirection by the server. 400 is a client error. And 500 is a server error. So, so you'll see like we have the dynamic here of client and server. I have competition for attention.
Yeah.
For the people in the broadcast, we're right at the spot where people play, so that's why it's so loud. We're like at the Macy's, you know, the Macy's parade. We're at the TV section.
Yeah.
Like everybody stops to play. So does anybody have any questions about that in terms of the status code?
You should get a better feel for some of this as you work through more examples.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all we've jumped from writing very specific individual lines of code that you're executing to a whole ecosystem of how things work. So it's hard to introduce this with the same granularity that you're introducing an array in Ruby.
Right.
You have to introduce a lot of concepts at the same time and then let them gel over time.
Yeah.
Work with it.
Yeah, this is very overview for sure. And it's just kind of a, just so you know what is out there and what to look for the more you get exposed to it. Let's see. And I think what we can do in order to kind of piece all this together and watch it sort of live, so we can write a tiny, little, very simple Sinatra app. Now, what is Sinatra? Sinatra is, I guess you could call it a framework. It's a lightweight framework written in Ruby, which allows you to develop web applications very quickly because it already has some predetermined tools that allow you to do that. So let's see if I can write a very simple one. And one thing that I encourage you guys to do is go to the Sinatra app website, and don't get discouraged because there's a lot of information. So it might not make sense to you at the beginning, and that's fine. Just kind of peruse, like especially the first part, the very first things that it requires you to do. I encourage you to try that, just like a simple application, just to see it work in your own computer and see how it behaves when you fire up your browser and when you run your server. So I'm going to show you how to do that.
You're gonna show us? Yay! They're all excited for that too.
So I don't know, did we talk about gems at all? Probably not, right?
We didn't. I was hoping to cover it near the end, but we did not talk about it.
Okay. So Ruby has this concept of gems. And a gem is a library, like you'll hear about libraries in other languages, which is just a bundle of code that you can reuse anywhere for a certain expected behavior. So you can get to a point where you can write your own gem. Like gems are just code written by somebody else or a group of other people collaborating and making something happen. So in order to install a gem, all you have to do is run the command gem, then install, and then the name of the gem. Let me see if I can do that real quick. You're gonna need it in order for this to work. I think I already have it, but it should be fine if I do it again, right? Probably.
Gem works.
Yeah.
Should be fine.
So that's all you do. You just do gem install Sinatra. It might take a second.
And these are all getting pulled down. There's a site out there, it's Ruby Gems, that has all of the public gems. And you can go look, you can go browse that and just see the tens of thousands of libraries that people have put up there for other people to use.
I should have done it without documentation. This was taking a while. Now let's keep reading here. Just so you guys know, what I did is I went to the website and clicked on README, and then I just scroll down to the beginning. And what it's saying is all I need is a file, I think I can name it whatever. The convention usually is app.rb or my app, or however you want to name it. Let's see. So I have that file right here, app.rb, and there's nothing on it. It's just your regular Ruby app. So the documentation tells me that I can do this. I can do this code, and let's see what that does when I run it in my app. So I canceled the installation because it takes a while. Already have Sinatra installed, so I'm just going to show you what's going on. So I have a get that / do hello world, and I'm going to try that. The documentation tells me just run the file like you would any other Ruby file, and let's see what happens. Oh. Okay, so it says undefined method get for main object. I have an error right away. Well, what's going on? Do you guys maybe know why I have a error?
You missed the require.
I missed the require. Yep, that's correct. So the require, what it does is it will pull in that gem that I just installed on my computer. And that is the same as if I had this on, well, essentially I do have those files in my computer, and I'm just bringing those in to this file so I can get all the methods that exist already. So this get method exists on that gem, and I will be able to call on it now. Okay, so we have something going on here. It says Sinatra is taking the stage on 4, 5, 6, 7 for development with backup from Puma. And I believe Puma is the server itself, or like the server tool that is default on Sinatra. And importantly, we see down here it says listening on TCP localhost 4, 5, 6, 7. What that means is that the server is running locally on this port, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that port can be anything. I think Sinatra just uses that one as a convention. Huh?
I'll say one thing you'll notice is totally different than any other programs that we've run at this point in time, or very different than most of them, is this program didn't run and exit, right? This program, you can see he's not back at the prompts. He can't put data back in at this point in time. This program did something different in the sense that this program ran, but it's sort of continuing to run. And remember when we wrote, what are some examples? We wrote like the record collection program where you input your records and it would go through the loop, and then when you were done, it would go back up to the loop and ask you for input again. And you could exit it if you chose to, but typically it would just keep going through that loop. This is much more like that. There's just, this program continues to run and sits there running until it's explicitly shut down. And it's also waiting for somebody to ask it for something or do something. It's just sitting there waiting, going, all right, I'm good, I'm running, and I'm waiting. Yeah, I'm just waiting.
Yeah, I'm listening for a question, waiting on a question. So yeah, that's right. So that essentially means that the server is running. Whenever you hear that phrase, it means your server is running. If I were to access Control C to stop, server has ended. I have no server anymore. And so that's where you want to keep that distinction of server versus client. When you run this again, this is your kitchen. This is your chef waiting on orders. And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start, I guess, building recipes for those orders. So we have the first one. First one is get/do hello world. Now, who's gonna ask for that recipe? It's gonna be the client. And in this case, the client is Chrome, or, well, any browser, really. So let's go to it. So we know that the server is listening to localhost 4567, and I'm going to pass it /, which typically means it's the root directory of that website. Oh, that's not intent. Was that the intent? What happened there?
Oh, you went something else somewhere?
No. Maybe? Let's see. Here it is. I did have that at some point, but like I thought I killed it. So that server's still running somewhere. That is the
Do PS-A, PS space -A, and then pipe into Brett. I don't know, Ruby might work. Let's see here.
It's AOX too, right? Like I can do this.
You can do capital A always too. Type that into grep Ruby. Grep.
Oh yeah.
All right. Those are the same 3 processes, right? Oh no, I see. Oh, you get the grep and then the 3 processes. So we have a start, an S, and a C. No, those look like.
I can just kill it. Like I probably can kill Ruby on the activity monitor. I'm gonna kill the terminal.
Yeah, I don't even know what you're talking about now.
No.
You just said Mac stuff, and I'm like, yeah.
Sometimes the servers go rogue. I have a bunch of stuff here.
Yeah, you're running a bunch of Ruby right now.
Yeah.
Why didn't all those show up here?
Let's kill that. Live demoing. It's fun. All right. You gotta slide it, yeah.
We trapped you.
Okay. It should work. Let's try it out. Hey, look at that. Okay. So that's your essential get, like your very primitive.
Pull up your DevTools so we can see the back of what happened in the background there too. Yeah, network.
Okay. Yep. So that's the get. I'm gonna click on it, and here's the response. Hello world. The request method was get. Status code 200. Okay. Now that status code is being fed back by Sinatra I guess magically is the word, but it's being done through some code that you don't see. The gem is doing it. I think you can override that.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, and I think it's just status. Let's see. I don't know.
404.
404. Let's try
Does that work? Will that work?
Probably. Have to. Sinatra has this thing where, like, if you make any changes, you have to kill the server for changes to take effect. So I just killed it and then restarted again. Yep. And look at that, 404. So there's nothing that restricts you to the combinations as to what thing does. It's just a convention that people have agreed to for service to work properly. You could potentially do a post action that deletes stuff. You don't want to do that because that's very bad for people using your website. But there's nothing rigidly restricting or forcing you to do that. You have to be disciplined enough to know what is the proper usage of your server.
Next time we did not go through. Next time when it goes 404.
Right, because the client knows that this is an error, and so it doesn't know.
Click on that. I want to see if it returned the data still. Response. No.
Okay.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. Yeah, me either. So I guess who would have done that? Sinatra?
That's gotta be Sinatra.
Sinatra, yeah.
Sinatra saw that you needed a 404 and that you probably don't have any 404 thing to return, so it didn't return what you had otherwise.
Yeah. So if I leave this blank, then Sinatra will know that this is fine when I do get /. So if you notice, this matches this right here. If I do that. Well, okay, sorry, I gotta kill the server. Something I always forget in Sinatra.
Use your Rails.
Yeah. And here we go again. So anything, I mean, I can put anything here and it'll show because it's executing whatever is inside that block. Another thing to notice is you have get, and that maps to that action, get. So typically you will have on a Sinatra app, you can have post. Let's see. And does that make sense? So what you'll have different blocks that have the actions. You have post action, you have put action, and you have delete action. Now it's up to you to fill each one with logic. So right now, those actions don't do anything. If I were to make the browser request each action on that URL, it would not do anything. For example, I can do the same thing here. Probably I won't be able to. So
It's a little hard to get to a post without.
yeah. So now I can pass in this into the browser, and it should give me this string. Does that make sense?
Go to one that doesn't exist. I want to see what Sinatra does. Something to here. Doctor doesn't know this, did he? That's funny.
And a cool thing about Sinatra is that whenever you do something that doesn't make any sense, it will give you a suggestion as to what to do in your code. It's like, hey, you just typed in, I don't care, but in my code, I don't have a method that takes in this string. So if you want this to work, do this. Let's see. I want to introduce, well, I don't know if I should introduce, what time is it? 11:30. I don't want to get into put and delete yet, just because we already have gone through a lot in terms of taking information in. The get usually is pretty easy. Get is just reading stuff. And so I'm just going to continue down that way. Let's see. We get the concept of the URL, right? We can type in anything here, and in fact, I can do another thing, and as long as that matches, that will execute that code. Does that make sense so far? Okay. I think I'm gonna introduce params just a little bit, just so that you guys have an idea what params is, and I'll do it through the get method. I'm a very big fan of try. It's not required, but I would highly suggest it. And what this does is like a IRB replacement. It's also a gem, so if you need it to work, you have to do gem install pry. And I'm going to put stuff in this section just to see what's going on in there. And let me kill the server. Oh yeah. Or bang bang, right? I think like
yeah.
Yeah. So let's try that same URL again. And what's happening? We see here that we have waiting for localhost. And it's kind of stuck. Like, well, why is that? Does anybody know? The server is stuck. It has reached this line of code, and this is designed to stop the runtime at this location. So the client still hasn't received any information. It's waiting on the server to give it back information, but the server is stuck here, waiting on me to do something about it. And what?
Yeah, it's done this so far, right? It sent the request down, but I haven't heard back.
Yeah, it hasn't heard back. Yep. So I'm inside of that method, and I can look and see what's going on there. So let me put that up there just so you can see. And the cool thing about pry is you can do ls. That gives you a lot of information, but if you do, let's see. Yeah. So this is just the methods inside of that one object. And the important ones are here. We have Sinatra-based methods, and we have options, params, request, response. These are the big ones, I think, request, params, response. And so I'm going to inspect them. I can just do params. What does this look like? Params. Does it look familiar? this symbol right here. No? Huh? But it looks a lot like a hash, right? A Ruby hash. If we do foo, and we look at the class, that's a hash. But there's something a little different about params, though. And I'm sorry if it doesn't make any sense yet, but it will in a second. If I do params class, also a hash. Now, why is this important? I'll show you here in a second why that's important. Because sometimes you want to send information inside that block that's coming from the client. Some custom information that you'll need for whatever logic you have inside. And the way you do it is, you can do it manually. I'm going to do it manually here on this side. For this to continue, I have to exit out of this session. You look at the request. That's a lot. I'm going to pass in, I think you do it like this, right? That's how you do it, right?
Should be.
All right, so I don't know if you guys caught it, but up here in the URL, through this syntax, I'm passing name equals Jorge. And that's what is called a parameter. That is the client making a specific question as to what information they want the server to know. And when that is done in the URL, Sinatra automatically adds that to the params, so that by the time it gets here, you can look at params, and all of a sudden we have a hash with a key name and the value Jorge. So I can do anything with this data. I can now maybe say hello to myself. How do we access this? Key? Yeah. Name. Yep. You guys see that? So if I do, let's see. Does that make sense? You're passing information to the server, and the server is sending it back again to you in a certain format. We can also, let's see. What do we think is going to happen there? Remember, this is still Ruby, but it's a little tricky, so I don't think, it's okay if you guys don't get it, but do we have any guesses?
I think it's gonna put the information to the console.
Yes.
But I don't know. I don't know.
Good job, Jared. You're such a great student.
I'm just guessing.
So yeah, that's exactly right. Now, remember puts used to output on the terminal. Now, what this is going to do in Sinatra is going to put that information right here. in the terminal window where the server is running. So that would be considered a server log. You're gonna find that later on, that the log is gonna be very important to you when you're coding, because it's gonna tell you what the server is doing. Hopefully, not all the time, but like the majority of the time, it will give you major clues as to if there's a problem or how it's behaving. So let's try that. Okay, something happened. We have a problem. It's not doing. Okay. So we see here that it did go into the log, but I don't see it out here. I don't see the hello Jared string. Yeah, I know, very rude. Do we have any suspicion as to why that is the case? This line works, but hey, I have nothing here.
What was the return data on my GET request? What was the response?
This request has no response data. So I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it has to do with the location of this code. I think it's because it's the last thing on the block. It evaluates to that, and it doesn't care what's happening on the top. And then to confirm my suspicions, I'm going to try to switch the sequence and see what happens. Goodbye. Goodbye.
No, it's just gone for a second.
So we have now the string again, and to see if the log worked. It did. So that's a dynamic that you have to be very mindful on, not only on Sinatra, but eventually on Rails, because now we're entering into the convention side of programming. So far, we've been exposed to just code as is, right? You code something, and it should work as you exactly intended. But now that we're entering into a gem or a program that somebody else coded, they have an intent as to how it should work. And you should be aware of that intent, because now you have to code around that intent, because you're going to have different behaviors. And that's where the convention comes in. Nobody's forcing you to use a / or to use a get, or for the get to behave this way. But it's conventionally done that way because everybody does it, and that's what is agreed upon. And that is the tricky part. Like, that's when you're gonna start to have more of a sense of, oh, something didn't behave this way. Let me look at the convention of how Sinatra treats this, or how Rails treats this. So in this case, it executed this code, which it went to the log. And then, since this is the last line evaluated, Sinatra knows to send that data back as a response to the client. Does anybody have any questions about that?
Do we need to have that push parameter for this tree?
For it to
is it required?
require, no. So this can go away, and you may not want any log output. It's fine. Just know the parameter still exists as a variable, and that you have access to it. In fact, what what do we think is going to happen if, what is the delimiter between, is it a comma or
No, it's ampersand.
ampersand?
I believe.
That's right,
I
right?
can't read it.
Oh,
So
okay.
it is.
So what do we think is going to happen there? Four oh four? Not quite. Let's try it. So we have a 200, okay. But we didn't see any changes here. It just says hello, Jared, right? Well, let's see what happened here. Everything went fine. You know, there was no change. So let's find out what happened to that data. I'm going to. Huh? Oh, yep. There it is. Now it's a little confusing because I took off the puts and I didn't kill the server. So this code, this server is still running on the other code. So let me kill it and put in the pry. And let's try it again. Okay. What do we think? What do we think the params is going to look like? Remember, params is a hash. And since it's a hash, now I'm passing two pieces of data up here. I'm passing name, Jared, last name. What is it?
Sirma.
Sirma.
Unpronounceable. Last name, unpronounceable.
Last name 404.
Yeah.
All right, let's look at it. Same hash, same params, but now it has a mixture of key value pair. So now I can do, if I want to access that information, I can do and so the website is not doing anything because I'm not calling it at any point, but it still exists for you to access it and do something with it. And you're gonna see that pattern over and over. There's a convention on URL, I guess definition for parameters. Let me see if I can show it real quick. We have time? Yeah. Just that's the last thing. And now you see that I did a colon after name or before name, not just regular name. And what that means is that whatever string I'm passing there is going to be a parameter. So what just happened here is the same as that. It's just a shorthand for it. Let's see if it works as expected. So I believe now instead of doing that, I can just do. Oh, did I not? It's not running. Okay. Now, there's more stuff happening here that Sinatra is added, so it looks a little different. But we still have access to name Jared now. And so this is called a param, I think a variable, right? A variable, params variable, maybe?
Oh, I don't know. That's going to be whatever that back end is.
Okay.
Because there's no requirement that they have to be defined that way
Oh, okay.
by back ends.
Okay. So Sinatra, this is, you define this as whatever you put in the client, this is going to be the key to the params hash. So it's taking the name symbol, adding it as a key to the hash, and then whatever gets passed in the URL, in this case, just that string, will be the value of that key in the params hash. How do we feel about that? Is that a lot? It's a little bit of a lot, isn't it? But that's okay. You're gonna see this more often, and this is not gonna be the first time you're gonna see it, and it's gonna trip you up. Like I know it did for me. You forget that is the concept, and so it takes a while. Don't worry about it if you don't get it right now. But the main takeaway from this is that you have in your framework, you have your action, you have your URL, you have the code that runs inside, and you have access to parameters that can be passed in either by the client or by the user. And that's kind of, it's a little bit of a shift between, whereas before we would set a variable and you coded in the variable. It's a little the same mechanics, just different concepts, more towards like the language of web development. You're going to see this a lot. So I don't know if do you want anything else to add, or?
That's good.
So I think that is like an intro to web development. Of course, there's more, but as long as you play, like I would encourage you very highly to just play with this. Just add things and play with the parameters. And if you guys have any questions as to what pry is, I can give you a lot of help with that, because it's very useful to understand what is going on in your environment. That's all I have, unless there's more questions.
Good job.
Cool.
Don't forget to end your stream.
Oh, that's right.
Streaming forever.
Where is it? Oh, there it is. Oh,
No.
gross.
You didn't stop broadcast. You just stopped screen sharing.
I'm really
Go back.
I didn't? Oh.